defense in the European Union. Okay, so you want to start?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me, Marcos. Thanks for hosting me to this invitation. Foreign policy and defense in the European Union. I think that we are in a very crucial moment right now, right? With all the things are going in Europe, and especially with the ongoing war in Ukraine and all these talks about rearmaments and defense spending. We just recently had the last NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey, and there was a lot actually ongoing, even with some people saying, if there is so much disagreements into the NATO alliance right now, it's probably better if we don't meet that much, and maybe we reduce the number of these summits and stop having it on annual basis, and maybe having like biannually or just once every 2 years. So of course there is a lot of friction. We all know about that. There is also a very strong time for changes. In using the words of the Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb, and I'm quoting him from his recent books, we are in a sort of interregnum where many things are changing, and Europe needs to adapt very quickly. Like the defense infrastructure of Europe needs to be reframed entirely. This is not going to happen by day nights. Of course, it's gonna take some time. It's gonna take some years.
Yes, we are accelerating so many projects regarding internal production, and we are increasing military spending. But the problem that we have is that we are still being very dependent on the United States regarding
That's correct.
defense.
That's correct. That's correct. And also because, let me say something, because this is something that many people actually don't mention, or mention too little to me. Is it true that we're still dependent from the United States for defense procurement? But it's also true that the United States is very reliant on dual-use technology coming from Europe. For example, I'm based in Italy, and you will be surprised how many, stuff Leonardo, the Italian defense company, actually provide. Leonardo has been one of the main suppliers, for example, for the F-35 program, which, it was actually fundamental to development of some equipments that today are in modern days F-35s used in several NATO countries. So that's one thing that also we have to take in consideration, how interconnected and entrenched the global supply chain also for defense procurement really is. But this is also true what you mentioned, the fact that indeed we are too heavy dependent on the United States, especially in an age where we cannot be so sure anymore that the United States is indeed a reliable partner. We have relied so much on them.
The thing with the US is that it is not that it's not a reliable partner. It's that the US has a different foreign policy goals than the European Union. We have different foreign policy goals, we have different interests, and that's why it's very important for the European Union to pursue its own foreign policy and have its own defense supply chains and defense production.
That's true. That's true. But also, let me say, as I was going to say, this is not going to happen by day night. Indeed, we really need to diversify and to improve our cooperation between Europeans in the defense procurements. There is some important technology that Europe has not, but it has the capability, and that's the most important thing. It has the capability to develop those. Europe has the know-how and has the good university and the R&D capable of producing. It's just a matter of willingness, like political willingness to do that. And also I will say that we have to remain open to cooperation with other like-minded partners that are not necessarily European, like to mention Canada, Japan, Italy, for example. In this, I think, is a good example with this sixth-generation fighter jet, the so-called GCAP project, where, for example, Italy is working together with the United Kingdom, that is a European partner, but not a member of EU anymore, and also with Japan. And
Yeah, but it is very important to have a relationship with the UK because it's the second biggest economy of Europe and it's a huge military industrial country, and it's very important to have relationship with them because we have the same geography, we share the same threats, we have the same energy needs, we are in the same
we have the
place,
same
and
values as
yeah.
well, like especially when it comes to defense of Europe and with the ongoing war in Ukraine. We have the same goals, we share the same values, and there is a lot like we can easily say that indeed formally they left the European Union, but geography is still there, of course. And
Now most of British disagree with leaving the European Union and they regret leaving the European Union.
yes, I will say so. I mean, especially with all the things ongoing in the UK, there is a part of population that indeed is still, regretting to have left the European Union. And we can even say that, I mean, this is actually something that you can see 10 years after Brexit, things are not going well. The aspiration for the UK to become a global Britain, how many were actually talking about back in times, are not realizing at the moment. Indeed, UK is still is in economic trouble. Like, I
And
mean,
especially is in high political instability.
that's correct. I mean, fair to say is not England is not alone. We can say the same for France, for example. Germany is having its own troubles as well, and even Italy, even if from outside perspective, with Giorgia Meloni, with the current Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, it may look much more stable country than it was before. Is still very weak, especially economically, and it has too much power to spend in defense, which is something that indeed we should do more as Italians and as European. But let me tell you something about this. It's not because there is a lot of discussion about spending more, reaching this famous threshold of 5% within NATO. Is not much about how you spend. I mean, it's not much how much you spend. It's much more how you spend. How wisely you spend your money and how you coordinate with the other European partners in order
That's
that
the
you
main problem that we remain extremely fragmented. Less than 20% of the military production is not done coordinated.
exactly. There is, let's be honest, there is no coordination or really strong coordination within the framework of the European Union or NATO how much we should spend. We have a targets, and every country is trying to reach that target independently, which is not the optimal solution, because otherwise in this way you will end up having, I don't know, 6-7 different variation of a fighter jet, or 6-7 different variation of a tank, which is not the optimal solution when you go to war, because
We
what you want
waste
at war.
tens of billions of dollars a year by fragmentation.
Correct, correct, and it's not even optimal on the battlefield. We saw that in the battlefield of Ukraine during the first 2 years, when, for example, we were providing to the Ukrainians different kind of tanks, the Abrams, the American ones, the Leopard, and many others kind of equipment, also with missiles. And it meant that back in the time we had to help the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians had to deal with several supply chain for equipment, spare parts, things that are very complicated already in the battlefield. When you have just one type of equipment, a very standardized type of equipment, imagine to have like 2, 3, even 5 different type of equipments. It means that you have to keep 3 to 5 supply chains open in order to get the spare parts and equipment that you need in order to have your war machine keep running.
So, how do you think the European Union should approach these common defense projects?
That's a very interesting question, because we see that indeed there have been already attempts to do so, but not so much successful. I think that in concept, the coalition of the willing is a good start, but it just need more power and much more political will to do so. So the idea of having a NATO without, for example, the U.S. pillar, the American pillars sustaining it, it's already, I mean, it's already there on the table, and we have to deal with that. What we have to do is actually to have more integration and cooperation, not necessarily coordinated on a European or NATO level, but we just need the willing of two or more major European countries, like namely France, Germany, Italy, the UK. Again, this is not necessarily need to be an European or NATO framework. It needs to be something where actually big countries are willing to cooperate, big countries are willing to experiment in integrating supply chain, integrating operations, integrating operability on the battlefield. And then I think that more countries will follow, because let's be realistic. If you have an alliance where actually Germany, Poland, and France are cooperating together, definitely countries like Estonia or Czech Republic would like to be part of it just for their own security. But you need to have the political will to try to experiment and try to go further those kind of policy that are really hard right now to be accepted by many public opinions across Europe. We can also discuss about that, but I think also one of the reasons is because of we have the rising of many populist countries that, yeah, they brand themselves like nationalistic and patriotic, but
They are everything but nationalistic.
Exactly. They are probably in most of country, we can say that they are acting like more like a sort of fifth column in favor of Russia, like definitely advancing Russian interest in those
Like
countries.
Russian interests are based on increasing the energy influence that Russia has in Europe and to return of the influence that they had before 2022. And all of these parties promoting to continue with this energy dependence are anti-nationalist parties, because this energy dependence was the biggest weakness that the European Union had, and it was the reason why the Russia was willing to attack Ukraine, because they thought that by this energy dependence, the European Union wouldn't be able to to be against this war and to put sanctions on Russia.
Yeah, that's true. Energy dependence is one, but is not the only one, in my opinion. I also think that, for example, they are really like profiting from having a divided European Union and in general spreading chaos all through Europe, because this makes Europe, of course, fragmented and easy to control. Let's say Europe has been a battlefield for try to from foreign influence for several decades right now, from the United States, and for Russia as well. And of course, a European Union can be a huge problem for Vladimir Putin and for the current elite sitting in Moscow, because of course it can be a pool of attraction for all those countries like Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia that actually would like to join the European Union. We
They are
see
trying to
already
join the
like
European
how.
Union, and I think they will in the next years.
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure if they will be in the next few years. For a country like Ukraine, it's going to be still a very long and uncertain process, especially considering how the war will develop in the next few months and years. Definitely, countries like Moldova are much closer right now. Armenia, we have seen Armenia that is getting closer as well, once they are finally realized that Russia is not a trustful security partner, at least not anymore for them. Georgia is is very much more complicated, considering how the situation is developing in that country. In general, the possibility to join over the European Union and NATO as well is a very long process, and those countries needs to do the reform that are necessary. But indeed, it remains the fact that Europe represents a sort of attraction for those countries that really want to become richer and much more democratic. At least, sort the public opinion of those countries, or part, we can say the majority of those public opinion of those countries is what they desire. But at the same time, indeed, and this kind of model represent a sort of threat for Russia. Many analysts, for example, have said that Russia cannot tolerate a democratic and free Ukraine on this frontier because it will represent a threat for the current establishment in the Kremlin. Because if they have that model so close to home, then like ordinary Russian can start to question why we cannot have the same.
Most of Russians and even some elites in Russia, from the financial and the political aspects of the Russian elite, are now against this war, or against how much the economy of Russia is being destroyed by this war. More than 40% of its federal spending now goes to war. They have very high interest rates, and there are already so many critics to this war inside the Kremlin, and also in the Russian people. Because this war, I always say that this war is against the Russian government, it's not against the Russians.
Let's put it this way. Russia is right now losing of any fronts on the
In the battlefield and financially, both.
Yes, but let's put it this way on two levels, like tactics and strategic. On tactics, of course, they are losing on any fronts already, but they are still able to keep going with the war machine and with the war economy. On the strategic fronts, on the other hand, Russia is, in my opinion, Russia has already lost this war, and the consequences are going to be deep and profound for the next decades. Actually, if Russia had any aspiration to be a global superpower for the next century, I don't think that this will happen anymore. I mean, Russia is already a huge
after what
part
they
of
did.
China. Exactly. An entire generation lost. The brightest minds already fled home because they were afraid of this general mobilization. Some have come back. Don't get me wrong. Some of them already left Dubai, Georgia, Serbia, where they were actually hiding, and they came back to Russia. But still, like the entire, as you said, 40% of the economy now is a war economy. It means that the moment that you stop this, then probably a huge part, if not the entirety of Russian economy, is going to default, is going to collapse. And I know that many have been, there are so many people right now that have been calling for the doomsdays of Russian economy, and still Russian economy is still ongoing. But on the long term, even if you don't see a huge crash, a huge fall, you can already see the decline of the Russian society and of the Russian economy, which is not able to keep up with the example with the two big major powers that are China and the United States. And of course, it doesn't have the rich population of Europe has right now. So it will take decades, several decades, before Russia will be able, to be back on the global stage.
The problem that they have is that Europe now is accelerating towards electrification. In the next 25, 30 years, we will reach close to 60%. And this will massively reduce the influence that Russia had in Europe, thanks of having this enormous energy influence. Europe was importing more than 50% of its gas from Russia, and more than 20% of the oil. We were importing so much from Russia. Now we are exporting way less, and we are reducing that over the next years. And now Russia is extremely dependent on China and India. They buy more than 80% of Russian oil. So Russia now doesn't have any influence in Europe, and will lose the influence that they have now in the future, and they will be extremely dependent on China and India. So that's why it will be impossible for them to be a global superpower in the way of the European Union or the US or China and India.
Yes, indeed, they will not have the same power, and especially considering that even if it's oil is a big percentage of the today energy output, global output, it will be reducing and reducing more. I mean, China is already, transitioning towards electrification. The US is still behind, but of course it's on its own resources, and Europe as well is trying to diversify with the green energy sources. So whatever you put it, Russia has a very grim future ahead, and that's why I'm very skeptical to think that Russia will be able to keep a superpower posture on the global stage.
Okay, so I think we have enough with this.
Okay, it was good.
Yes, it was perfect. Then
Okay,
now we're going to do some shorts. We will publish them in social networks, and we will publish this video once we edit it in YouTube.
okay, sounds good for me.
Okay.
Uh, Thanks a lot for hosting me, Marcos.
Okay. Same. So we will do a new one in the next weeks if you can.
Yeah, sure. Sounds
Okay.
good for me.
Perfect. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Marcos.